The arrival on Torkin's bastion. Eli Mercer, a battle-hardened human soldier, found himself crouching behind a jagged outcrop on Torkin's bastion, a barren and hostile planet in the outer reaches of the galaxy. The planet, though desolate on the surface, hid vast underground caverns where the cruel Ithran syndicate had established their infamous slave camps. For decades, the Ithran had ravaged alien colonies, abducting vulnerable populations for their twisted profit. Eli had volunteered for this mission, not because he was ordered, but because he couldn't stomach the idea of another species suffering under such tyranny. The coalition of free worlds, the fledgling alliance of human and alien civilizations, lacked the resources for large-scale intervention. So Eli went alone, armed with determination, basic survival gear, and a conviction that humanity was destined to be more than mere spectators in this war-torn galaxy. As he descended into the cavernous depths of the Ithran stronghold, the air grew thick with despair. Dim, artificial lights flickered, illuminating the haggard forms of slaves chained together. Most were Marelians, a delicate race with luminous, iridescent skin and hauntingly beautiful, reflective eyes. Their psychic abilities, once a source of pride, were suppressed by cruel inhibitors grafted into their spines. Among the prisoners, Eli's attention was drawn to two figures whispering urgently. One was Amara, a Marelian resistance leader known for her strategic brilliance before her capture. The other, Syrah, her younger sister, radiated a quiet strength despite her obvious exhaustion. Eli made a mental note, these two might be the key to rallying the others. Eli's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Ithran enforcers. Their guttural snarls filled the air as they barked orders and dragged a weak Marelian from the line. Eli's jaw tightened. He knew he couldn't stay in the shadows for long. The time to act was fast approaching. Sparks of rebellion. Eli Mercer watched as the Ithran enforcers dragged their victim, a frail Marelian man, toward the central pit where punishments were doled out with cruel efficiency. His muscles tensed. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to intervene, but he knew that charging in recklessly would get him killed and doom the prisoners. He needed a plan, and he needed the trust of the captives. Silently, Eli retreated deeper into the shadows, weaving through the maze of tunnels until he found what he was looking for, a storage bay filled with Ithran weapons and supplies. The enforcers were arrogant, leaving their stockpile lightly guarded. Eli's experience as a commando paid off as he neutralized the lone Ithran guard with a quick strike. Inside the room, he discovered not only weapons but also detailed schematics of the slave camp. His eyes scanned the map. There it was, the power hub. If he could disable it, the inhibitors suppressing the Marelians' abilities would fail, and chaos would follow. But that wasn't enough. He needed the prisoners ready to fight. Eli pocketed a handful of plasma charges and made his way back to the prisoners. By the time he arrived, the punishment had begun. The captive from earlier had been tied to a post, surrounded by jeering Ithran guards. A whip cracked through the air, striking the man's back, and Eli saw the pain ripple through the other captives. Their luminous eyes burned with helpless rage, but no one dared move. They had been broken, beaten into submission over months of suffering. Amara, however, was different. Her fists clenched at her sides, and her sharp, reflective eyes darted toward the guards, calculating. She stepped forward slightly, but Syrah grabbed her arm. "Don't," Syrah whispered, her voice trembling. "They'll kill you." Amara didn't respond, but Eli could see the defiance in her stance. He had seen that same fire in resistance leaders back on Earth, people who had nothing left but their will to fight. She was exactly what he needed. Taking a deep breath, Eli stepped from the shadows. His sudden appearance startled the prisoners and the guards alike. The Ithran closest to him raised a weapon, but Eli was faster. With a precise shot from his energy pistol, the guard dropped to the ground. The other Ithran froze in confusion, their guttural language filling the cavern as they called for reinforcements. Eli turned to the prisoners, speaking loudly enough for them to hear over the commotion. "You don't know me, but I'm here to help. If you want to be free, now's the time to stand up and fight." The slaves stared at him in shock, their luminous eyes reflecting fear and disbelief. The idea of rebellion had been beaten out of them long ago. Amara was the first to step forward, her jaw tight with determination. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp and clear. Eli Mercer, he said, his tone firm but earnest. Human Coalition Commando. I've sabotaged their power grid. When it goes down, your inhibitors will fail. I'll arm you, but I can't do this alone. You need to fight. Amara studied him for a long moment. Her gaze was piercing, as though she could see the truth in his words. Finally, she nodded. I'll fight. Her declaration sent a ripple through the crowd. Syrah hesitated, her fear evident, but when she saw her sister's resolve, she nodded as well. Slowly, more captives stepped forward, until a small group of prisoners stood ready. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The Ithran reinforcements arrived just as Eli tossed a plasma rifle to Amara. Let's make this count. The first wave of guards charged into the cavern, their guttural roars echoing through the tunnels. Eli fired quickly, taking down 2 before they could react. Amara, despite her weakened state, fired with surprising accuracy, her movements fluid and precise. The prisoners armed themselves with weapons Eli had stolen, and though their strikes were clumsy at first, the tide of the fight began to turn. The air filled with the sounds of gunfire and shouts. For the first time in months, the captives weren't cowering, they were fighting back. Amid the chaos, Eli turned to Amara. The power hub is in the central chamber. I need to plant charges to take it down. We'll cover you, she said without hesitation. Eli nodded, his respect for her growing with each moment. Together, they pushed through the tunnels, fighting their way toward the hub. The Ithran were ruthless, but Eli's tactics and Amara's leadership kept the group moving forward. As they reached the central chamber, Eli's heart raced. The power hub loomed before them, a massive construct of glowing conduits and humming machinery. It was heavily guarded, but the prisoners pressed on, their determination outweighing their fear. Eli set the charges quickly, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. 30 seconds, he shouted. We need to move. The group retreated as the charges detonated. The explosion rocked the cavern, sending waves of energy through the tunnels. The inhibitors flickered and died, and Eli felt the shift immediately. The Marelian's psychic energy surged, their eyes glowing brighter than ever. Amara let out a breathless laugh, the newfound power coursing through her veins. It's back, she said, her voice filled with awe. Eli nodded. Now we finish this. The tide of the rebellion had shifted, and for the first time, the prisoners had a fighting chance. Rise of the resistance echoes of freedom. The dust settled, and the cavern fell silent save for the distant sounds of fleeing Ithran guards. Eli Mercer stood at the center of the chamber, surveying the aftermath of their victory. The rubble where the warlord and his elite guards had been buried was now a makeshift monument to the resistance. The surviving prisoners, their luminous eyes filled with newfound hope, gathered around. Amara leaned heavily against Syrah, her psychic energy drained from bringing the ceiling down. Despite her exhaustion, she stood tall, her gaze unwavering. We've won this battle, she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. But this is just the beginning. There are more camps, more prisoners waiting for someone to stand up. The group murmured in agreement, but uncertainty lingered in their faces. They had tasted freedom, but the vast galaxy beyond these tunnels still held countless dangers. Eli stepped forward, his commanding presence drawing the attention of the crowd. Amara's right, he said. The Ithran Syndicate may have lost this camp, but they won't stop. They'll regroup and come back stronger. If we want this to mean something, we need to be ready to fight. A rallying call. Syrah glanced nervously at her sister. But how can we? We've been broken for so long. We're just survivors. Eli turned to her, his voice firm but understanding. You're more than that now. You've faced down the Ithran and won. You've proven you're stronger than they ever thought you could be. The galaxy is full of people who've been waiting for someone to take the first stand. That's what you've done today. The murmurs grew louder, and Eli could see the spark of rebellion igniting in their eyes. He stepped back, giving Amara space to address them. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. We can't do this alone, she said. But we don't have to. The Marelians have allies across the galaxy, those who will join us if they see that we're fighting back. We need to reach them, spread the word that the Ithran can be defeated. A tall, imposing prisoner stepped forward. His skin was a deep shade of violet, marking him as a Lorvian, a species known for their strength and resilience. If we fight, he said, his voice a low rumble, we need leaders. People who can show us the way. Amara's gaze flicked to Eli, and the unspoken question hung in the air. Would he stay and help them lead this rebellion? Eli hesitated. The fight wasn't over, but he had always been a soldier, not a leader. Still, he knew that his experience and skills could make a difference. I'll help, he said, his voice steady. But this is your fight. You know your people, your strengths, and your goals. I can't lead this rebellion, but I can give you the tools to win. Amara nodded, her respect for him evident in her expression. Then we start here. We rebuild, regroup, and prepare for the next battle. Plans in motion. Eli spent the following hours working with the prisoners to secure the camp. The Ithran's weapons stockpile was redistributed among the freed captives, and the tunnels were fortified in case of an immediate counterattack. Amara and Sira moved through the crowd, rallying the Marelians and organizing them into small units. Each group was assigned tasks, some would scout for supplies, others would monitor for Ithran movements. The Lorvian, who introduced himself as Corvin, took charge of the physical labor, clearing debris and securing escape routes. His booming voice and towering presence made him a natural leader, and the prisoners gravitated toward him. Eli found himself working side by side with Sira as they rigged the camp's communication system to send a distress signal to the coalition of free worlds. Sira's quiet determination impressed him, and he could see the same fire in her eyes that burned in Amara's. Do you think they'll come? Sira asked, her hands deftly rewiring the damaged console. The coalition? Eli replied, testing the signal strength. If they hear this, they'll come. They've been looking for a way to strike back at the Ithran. This camp could be the foothold they need. Sira nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. It's strange. For so long, I thought no one would ever come for us. But then you showed up. You're not like I imagined humans would be. Eli smirked. What did you imagine? She paused, her reflective eyes meeting his. Fragile. Small. But you're determined. You don't give up. Eli chuckled. We have a saying back on Earth, stubbornness is humanity's greatest weapon. Guess it's true. The quiet before the storm. As the camp settled into an uneasy calm, Eli found himself standing at the edge of the cavern, looking out toward the distant horizon. The destruction they had caused was evident in the rubble and scattered debris, but so was the hope in the eyes of the freed prisoners. They had taken their first step toward freedom, but the road ahead was long and uncertain. Amara joined him, her steps quiet. They're scared, she said, her voice soft. But they're also hopeful. It's been a long time since we've had hope. Eli nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Hope's a powerful thing. It can keep people going when nothing else will. She studied him for a moment. What about you? What keeps you going? Eli hesitated. The weight of his past battles, the friends he had lost, and the sacrifices he had made flashed through his mind. Knowing that I can make a difference, he said finally. Even if it's just for one person, one fight, it's worth it. Amara's expression softened. You've done more than make a difference. You've given us a chance. Eli didn't respond, but her words stayed with him. As the night deepened and the prisoners prepared for the battles to come, Eli knew that this was only the beginning. The rebellion had been sparked, and it was up to them to fan it into a flame that would burn across the galaxy. The explosion echoed through the caverns, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Eli Mercer crouched behind a jagged stone outcrop, watching the power hub erupt into a cascade of fiery sparks. The inhibitors were finally offline. He felt the shift in the air, a near-tangible hum of energy as the Marelians regained their long-dormant psychic abilities. For a moment, there was silence, a heavy pause before the storm. Then, chaos erupted. The Ithran guards, disoriented by the sudden loss of control, scrambled to regroup. Their guttural orders barked through the cavern, but they were met with resistance. For the first time in years, the enslaved Marelians were no longer powerless. Their luminous eyes glowed brighter, their psychic energy surging like a tidal wave. Amara stood at the forefront of the rebellion. Her hands crackled with psychic force as she faced down an Ithran enforcer. With a flick of her wrist, she sent the hulking alien crashing into a nearby wall. She turned to Eli, her reflective eyes blazing with a newfound determination. "We have a chance," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But they won't go down easily." Eli nodded, reloading his plasma rifle. "We don't need easy. We just need to keep fighting." The turning point. Syrah, Amara's younger sister, stood beside her. Unlike Amara, Syrah had always been hesitant, her courage buried beneath layers of fear. But now, with her powers returned, she stepped forward, her hands glowing with faint blue light. "I'm with you," Syrah said, her voice trembling but resolute. "They took everything from us. I won't let them win." Eli offered her a small nod. "Good. Stick close and watch each other's backs." As more Marelians joined the fight, the cavern became a battlefield. Eli moved with precision, his training as a coalition commando evident in every calculated shot and movement. Amara and Syrah fought beside him, their psychic abilities complementing his combat skills. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. The Ithran guards were relentless, their brutish strength and advanced weaponry making them formidable foes. But they were unprepared for the resistance they now faced. The Marelians fought with a desperation born of years of oppression, their psychic abilities turning the tide of the battle. Eli's voice rang out over the chaos. "Hold the line. Don't let them push us back." The prisoners rallied, their confidence growing with each small victory. For every Ithran that fell, their resolve deepened. The cavern, once a place of despair, became a symbol of defiance. The warlord's arrival. As the battle raged on, a low, rumbling sound reverberated through the tunnels. Eli's instincts kicked in, and he motioned for the others to take cover. From the far end of the cavern, a towering figure emerged, a heavily armored Ithran warlord flanked by an elite guard. Eli's jaw tightened. "That's their leader," he said, his voice grim. "They've brought out the big guns." The warlord's guttural voice boomed across the cavern. "You dare defy the Ithran syndicate? You will suffer for your insolence." Amara stepped forward, her hands glowing with psychic energy. "We've suffered enough," she shouted. "Now it's your turn." The warlord laughed, a deep, menacing sound. "Foolish girl. Your powers are nothing compared to the might of the Ithran." Eli glanced at Amara. "He's trying to intimidate us. Don't let him get in your head." Amara nodded, her gaze fixed on the warlord. "We end this. Together." The final push. The warlord's elite guard charged forward, their energy weapons blazing. Eli and the Marelians responded in kind, the cavern erupting into a fierce firefight. Amara focused her energy on one of the guards, sending him flying into a cluster of stalagmites. Syrah used her abilities to create a protective barrier, shielding a group of prisoners from incoming fire. Eli moved with precision, targeting the Ithran guards with deadly accuracy. But the warlord was a different beast entirely. His armor absorbed the psychic attacks, and his energy blade carved through the cavern with devastating force. He was a juggernaut, and every strike he delivered sent shockwaves through the battlefield. "We can't keep this up," Syrah shouted, her voice tinged with panic. "He's too strong." Eli clenched his jaw. He knew they couldn't overpower the warlord through brute force. They needed a strategy. His eyes darted to the crumbling ceiling above the warlord. An idea sparked. "Amara," he called out. "Bring the roof down." Amara followed his gaze, understanding immediately. She nodded, focusing her energy on the weakened section of the ceiling. Her hands glowed brighter as she poured everything she had into the effort. The cavern trembled, rocks and debris falling as the structure began to collapse. The warlord roared in fury, realizing the trap too late. With a deafening crash, the ceiling gave way, burying him and his elite guard beneath tons of rubble. The cavern fell silent, save for the sound of settling dust. Victory and resolve. Eli scanned the room, his weapon still raised, but there was no sign of the warlord or his guards. The remaining Ithran, seeing their leader defeated, turned and fled into the tunnels. A cheer erupted from the prisoners. For the first time in years, they were free. Amara stumbled, her strength spent, but Eli caught her before she fell. "You did it," he said, a rare smile crossing his face. "You all did." Amara nodded, her luminous eyes filled with a mixture of relief and determination. "This isn't the end," she said. "There are others like us, still trapped, still fighting." Eli nodded, his expression sobering. "Then we keep going. One fight at a time." The rebellion had begun, and though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: they wouldn't stop until every chain was broken. The first strike. The camp hummed with nervous energy as the freed prisoners prepared for their next move. Though victory had brought them hope, it also left them vulnerable. The Ithran syndicate wouldn't let this rebellion go unanswered for long. Every moment counted, and the resistance leaders Eli Mercer, Amara, and Corvin knew they needed to strike first before the enemy could regroup. Eli stood at the center of the cavern, a detailed map of the surrounding area spread out on a flat rock. The freed prisoners, now forming a ragtag militia, gathered around as he explained their plan. "The Ithran stronghold is here," Eli said, pointing to a cluster of symbols on the map. "It's their supply depot, heavily guarded but critical to their operations on this planet. If we take it out, we cripple their ability to send reinforcements and resupply other camps." Corvin, his imposing figure towering over the group, crossed his arms. "It's a bold move," he said. "But bold is what got us here." Amara nodded, her reflective eyes scanning the map. "We can't wait for them to attack us. We hit them first, hard and fast." The prisoners murmured in agreement, their fear tempered by the spark of determination Eli had ignited. Even Sarah, who had been reluctant to fight, stood among them with a quiet resolve. Eli tapped the map again. "We'll split into 2 teams. Team 1 will create a diversion at the main gate, drawing their forces out. Team 2, led by me, will infiltrate through the southern tunnel and plant charges on their ammo stockpile. When the charges detonate, we retreat." The plan was simple, but the execution would be anything but. The Ithran were brutal and well-armed, and even with the element of surprise, success was far from guaranteed. Amara stepped forward. "I'll lead the diversion team," she said. "We'll keep them busy long enough for you to get in and out." Eli met her gaze, his expression serious. "Be careful. If they realize it's a distraction, they'll come at you with everything they've got." Amara smirked, a hint of her old fire returning. "Don't worry about me. Just make sure your team gets the job done." A dangerous journey. As the 2 teams set out, the atmosphere was tense but focused. The group moved under the cover of darkness, the flickering stars above the only witnesses to their rebellion. Eli led his team through the southern tunnels, his years of combat training guiding their every step. The tunnels were narrow and winding, the air heavy with the metallic scent of damp stone. Eli's senses were on high alert, every sound and shadow a potential threat. Behind him, Sarah and a handful of other prisoners followed closely, their weapons clutched tightly. "Are you sure this will work?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Eli glanced back, his expression calm but firm. "It has to. If we don't hit them now, they'll hit us first. Trust the plan." Sarah nodded, though the tension in her shoulders didn't ease. She had never been a fighter, but Eli could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't fighting just for herself, she was fighting for her sister, for her people, for a future they had all thought lost. As they approached the depot, Eli signaled for the group to stop. He crouched low, peering through a narrow opening that revealed the Ithran stronghold. The depot was a sprawling compound, its towering walls lit by harsh floodlights. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements sharp and disciplined. Eli activated his comm device, whispering into it. Team 1, are you in position? Amara's voice crackled through the device. We're ready. On your signal. Eli took a deep breath, his mind racing through the plan one last time. Go. The battle begins. On the far side of the compound, an explosion shattered the stillness of the night. Flames erupted near the main gate, and the Ithran guards immediately mobilized. Amara's diversion team opened fire, their attacks precise and calculated. The guards scrambled to respond, their guttural shouts echoing across the compound. Move! Eli hissed, leading his team through the southern tunnel. They slipped through the shadows, the chaos at the gate drawing the guards away from their position. Eli's heart pounded as they reached the ammunition stockpile, a series of heavily fortified storage units at the center of the compound. Plant the charges, he ordered, keeping his weapon trained on the perimeter. Sarah and another prisoner moved quickly, attaching the explosives to the ammo crates. Their hands trembled, but they worked with a quiet urgency. Hurry, Eli urged, his eyes scanning the compound for any sign of reinforcements. Suddenly, a sharp cry rang out over the comm device. Eli, they're pushing back. Amara's voice was strained but steady. We're holding them, but we won't last long. Eli cursed under his breath. Hold on, Amara. We're almost done. The final charge was set, and Sarah gave him a nod. We're ready. Fall back, Eli said, motioning for the group to retreat. As they moved toward the tunnel, an Ithran patrol rounded the corner, their weapons raised. Eli fired instinctively, taking down 2 of them, but the others opened fire. The air filled with the whine of plasma bolts as Eli and his team dove for cover. Keep moving. Eli shouted, returning fire. We can't stop here. Sarah hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes, but Eli grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. You've come this far. Don't give up now. A narrow escape. The group sprinted through the tunnel, the sound of pursuing guards echoing behind them. As they neared the exit, Eli activated the detonator. A series of deafening explosions tore through the compound, lighting up the night sky. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the ammo stockpile erupted, sending shockwaves through the area. The pursuing guards faltered, their shouts drowned out by the chaos. Eli and his team emerged from the tunnel, breathing heavily but alive. On the other side of the compound, Amara's team disengaged, retreating under the cover of the explosions. They regrouped in a nearby ravine, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat but alight with victory. Eli met Amara's gaze, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. We did it. The depot's gone. Amara smiled, exhaustion and relief evident in her expression. One step closer. The rebellion had struck its first blow against the Ithran syndicate, but they all knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead was long and dangerous, but for the first time, the prisoners had hope and a reason to fight, uniting the stars. The air was thick with the aftermath of their strike. Smoke from the destroyed depot curled into the night sky, and the rebels regrouped in a secluded clearing. Though battered and bruised, the fire of victory burned brightly in their eyes. For the first time, they had struck a blow against the Ithran syndicate, a small but powerful step toward freedom. Eli Mercer stood at the center of the group, his sharp gaze scanning the faces of the Morelians, Lorvians, and others who now made up their ragtag rebellion. Each face told a story of suffering, loss, and resilience. For Eli, this wasn't just another mission. It was personal. Amara approached, her reflective eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The depot's destruction will send a message, she said. The Ithran won't ignore this. We need to be ready. Eli nodded. They'll come back stronger, and we can't hold this planet alone. We need allies. Sarah, still catching her breath, chimed in. But where do we find them? Who would risk standing against the Ithran? Corvin, the towering Lorvian, stepped forward. There are those who have suffered under the Ithran for years. Scattered resistance cells, abandoned colonies, and forgotten fleets. If we can show them we're serious, they might join us. The message of rebellion. Eli tapped into the stolen Ithran communication console, carefully bypassing its security protocols. The console sparked to life, its screen flickering with data. The group gathered around as he keyed in the frequency for a wideband broadcast. "This is Eli Mercer of the Coalition of Free Worlds," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "We have struck a blow against the Ithran Syndicate, destroying their supply depot on Torkin's Bastion. To those who hear this message, you are not alone. The Ithran can be defeated. Join us, and together, we can end their tyranny." The broadcast was a gamble. The message could inspire potential allies, or it could alert the Ithran to their location. Eli knew the risks, but the rebellion couldn't survive in isolation. They needed the galaxy to know they existed. Amara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "If this works, we'll need a plan to rally and protect anyone who answers the call. We can't afford to wait for the Ithran to strike first." Corvin nodded. "We've fortified what we can, but this camp won't hold against a full-scale assault. We'll need to stay mobile, keep ahead of their forces." Sarah, standing beside her sister, added, "And we need hope. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who hears our message." Eli turned to the group, his expression resolute. "Hope is why we're here. Hope is why we fight." The call answered. As the days passed, the rebels prepared for the worst. Scouts kept watch from hidden vantage points, and the camp buzzed with activity as they trained, fortified defenses, and gathered supplies. But the waiting was tense. Every moment felt like a countdown to the Ithran's retaliation. Then, on the third day, a response came. The communication console flickered to life, and a distorted voice crackled through the speaker. "This is Commander Valora of the Sarian Resistance. We received your message. If you're serious about standing against the Ithran, we're willing to meet." The rebels erupted into murmurs. Amara stepped closer to the console. "This could be the breakthrough we need," she said. "But it could also be a trap." Eli agreed. "We can't trust them blindly, but we can't afford to ignore this." "I'll go." "No," Amara said firmly. "We'll go. If this is a trap, you shouldn't face it alone." Eli hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. We'll take a small team. If it's legitimate, we'll gain powerful allies. If it's a trap, we'll be ready." The meeting. The rendezvous point was an abandoned outpost on the edge of Torkin's Bastion's largest canyon. The air was dry and cold, the winds howling through the jagged cliffs. Eli, Amara, and Corvin approached cautiously, their weapons ready but concealed. A small group emerged from the shadows, led by a striking Sarian woman with shimmering silver skin and piercing green eyes. Her posture was confident, her expression guarded. "Commander Valora," Eli greeted, keeping his tone neutral. Valora studied him for a moment before speaking. "You're either brave or foolish to send that broadcast. The Ithran will be hunting you now." "Let them hunt," Amara said, stepping forward. "We're done running." Valora's gaze shifted to Amara, then to Corvin. Finally, she nodded. "Good. If you're serious about this rebellion, we'll help. But you need to understand, we're not soldiers. We're survivors. And survival doesn't always mean fighting." Eli met her gaze. "Survival is meaningless without freedom. If we stand together, we have a chance." Valora studied him for a long moment, then extended her hand. "Then let's stand together." A growing flame. The meeting with Valora marked the beginning of a fragile alliance. The Sarian resistance brought valuable resources, ships, weapons, and intelligence. But they also brought stories of other groups scattered across the galaxy. The rebels worked tirelessly to coordinate efforts, sending envoys to contact other resistance cells and spread their message of defiance. Back at the camp, Sarah watched the growing unity with cautious optimism. "Do you think it's enough?" she asked Eli as they stood on a rocky overlook. "It's a start," Eli said. "But rebellions don't win overnight. They win because people refuse to stop fighting." Sarah nodded, her eyes reflecting the flickering lights of the camp below. "Then we'll keep fighting." Eli placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare moment of reassurance. "We will." As the rebels prepared for the battles ahead, the galaxy began to take notice. The flame of rebellion was growing, and though the Ithran syndicate loomed large, the rebels knew they had something far greater, the courage to fight for a better future.